This heater burns 80% less wood. Why did they ban it? Imagine opening your winter heating bill and seeing $300, maybe $400, maybe even more. A number you pay every single month just to keep the cold from crawling through your walls and into your bones. Now imagine that, somewhere in a forgotten garage in Oregon or a snow-buried cabin in Saskatchewan, sits a device almost no one talks about publicly, yet thousands of homesteaders quietly rely on. A heater that produces the same warmth as a modern furnace without a gas line, without electricity, and without the grid. A heater that can run for 24 hours on nothing but an armload of dead branches you gathered for free. This isn't speculation. This is a heating system that burns 80 to 90% less wood than a traditional fireplace. You light it once in the morning, it roars clean and hot for barely half an hour, and then it stays warm all day and all night, without another touch. People are using it right now to survive winters that freeze entire regions. They build it for under $300, often in a single weekend. But the moment you try to install one legally in most of the United States, you hit an invisible wall, built not by physics, but by an industry that profits from keeping you dependent. Welcome back to Historia Prime. Today we journey through ancient engineering, modern rediscovery, and the corporate maze that quietly shaped what you are allowed to heat your home with. This is the story of the rocket mass heater, how ancient civilizations mastered thermal mass, how modern society forgot it, how a handful of renegade engineers revived it, and why powerful interests moved quickly to keep it out of your living room. By the end, you may find yourself asking a dangerous question. How much of our dependence on modern heating is necessity, and how much of it is a trap we were never meant to escape? Part 1. The Lost Wisdom of the Ancients. To understand why the rocket mass heater is so extraordinary, we have to look back to a time when humanity understood heat very differently. Modern society believes warmth comes from blowing hot air into a room. The ancients knew better. They mastered thermal mass, using stone itself as the heater, long before we forgot the principle. Travel for a moment to the Roman Empire. Engineers there faced a daunting challenge, keeping vast stone bathhouses warm from dawn until night without feeding fires endlessly. Their solution was the hypocausts, a system whose name means fire beneath. Instead of putting the heat inside the room, they put it under the floor. The stone floor was lifted on small pillars, creating a hollow space. A furnace outside pushed hot gases horizontally beneath the entire structure, allow the stone to soak in the heat and release it slowly for hours. Bathers weren't warmed by air, they were warmed by radiant heat from the very bones of the building. Half a world away, ancient Korea arrived at the same principle and refined it for daily life. Their Ondol system sent the exhaust of the family cook stove through winding channels beneath thick stone floors. As the gases cooled on their journey, the stones above grew warm. One evening meal could heat a home until sunrise. The fire was brief. The stored heat was lasting. Both cultures discovered the same truth. The fire is not the heater, the mass is. The energy is captured, stored, and given back slowly, almost like a natural battery. Nearly all the fuel's heat remains inside the home instead of escaping into the sky. This elegant survival technology sustained empires and entire civilizations through brutal winters. Yet in the last century, we abandoned it and replaced it with systems that leak heat, require constant fuel, and fail the moment the grid goes dark. The rocket mass heater is not new. It is a rediscovery of wisdom we once understood instinctively and then forgot. Part 2. The Modern Amnesia and the Birth of the Rocket. When the 20th century arrived, it came with a dangerous illusion that energy was limitless and always available. We built thin wooden houses and filled them with machines designed to blow hot air into empty space. Forced air furnaces, baseboard heaters, oil boilers, systems that worked beautifully, right up until the moment the fuel supply faltered. One winter storm, one downed power line, and a modern American home could turn into a freezing wooden shell in hours. Yet these systems generated profit. They required fuel deliveries, replacement parts, annual maintenance, and constant consumption. A warm stone floor that held heat for free until morning offered no business model. And so the ancient logic of thermal mass slowly disappeared from our collective memory. But in the 1970s, a small group of ecologists in Oregon began to question the entire structure. The Aprovecho Research Center, founded in 1976, set out to design low-cost, low-tech solutions for communities without reliable electricity. Billions of people still cooked over 3 stone fires, losing almost all their heat and filling their homes with smoke. Among Aprovecho's founders was Ianto Evans, a Welsh ecologist steeped in traditions of building with earth. He believed simple materials could outperform industrial systems if guided by the right physics. Their early attempt, the Lorena stove, revealed how unforgiving those physics could be. Its clay walls absorbed too much heat, wasting wood instead of saving it. Efficiency on paper turned into inefficiency in practice. The turning point came with mechanical engineer Dr. Larry Winiarski. He stripped combustion down to first principles and recognized 2 universal failures: fires that burn too cool to consume their own smoke, and fireplaces that send most of their heat straight up the chimney. His solution was deceptively simple. Make the fire hotter, let it burn more completely, and trap the heat long enough for it to be useful. He designed an insulated combustion chamber and a J-shaped feed tube that allowed wood to burn sideways and then erupt upward into a superheated internal chimney. The insulation locked the heat inside, creating temperatures high enough to vaporize smoke and generate a powerful natural draft. More draft meant more oxygen meant cleaner combustion, and cleaner combustion meant more usable heat. When it ran, it sounded like a small jet engine. Tests showed it cut fuel consumption nearly in half. Winiarski called it the rocket stove. And while most people saw a cleaner cooking device, Ianto Evans saw something far bigger. If this fire burned so efficiently, and if its exhaust carried so much energy, then the next question was inevitable. What would happen if that heat weren't allowed to escape at all, but was captured, stored, and slowly released through the night? Part 3. The Anatomy of a Dragon. There is a flaw at the heart of every conventional wood-burning device. The fire inside them produces enormous heat, yet the hottest, most energy-rich gases escape untouched. In a typical fireplace, exhaust temperatures can exceed 600 degrees Fahrenheit. That is not abstract waste heat. That is your heat, your fuel, your labor, drifting straight into the sky. Even a modern certified stove still sends hundreds of degrees up the chimney, carrying away most of the energy you meant to keep. Ianto Evans asked a question almost no one else dared to ask. What if that heat didn't escape at all? What if the rocket stove's blazing exhaust could be captured, slowed down, and stored before it ever reached the outside air? Understanding the rocket mass heater is like examining the anatomy of a sleeping dragon. Everything begins with a J-shaped combustion chamber. The long arm is the feed tube, where simple twigs and branches enter. The short arm rises into a vertical burn chamber, built from high-temperature fire brick and wrapped in dense insulation. Together, they create a pocket where heat cannot escape. Above this chamber sits a metal barrel, often nothing more than a recycled 55-gallon drum. When you light the fire, the insulated walls reach extreme temperatures in minutes, 1,500, sometimes 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. At that threshold, the system transforms. The draft strengthens, the feed tube begins pulling oxygen automatically. The flame burns only at the tip of the wood, consuming every molecule of fuel it can reach. Smoke, the sign of wasted energy, disappears into the vortex and is burned completely. The barrel radiates quick, immediate warmth, but the exhaust does something far more interesting. Instead of rising up a chimney, the gases are pushed downward and into a long horizontal run of ducting. That duct snakes through a massive bench of earth, clay, sand, and straw packed together into a dense thermal battery. As the gases travel 20 or 30 feet through this mass, the earth pulls the heat out of them. By the time they reach the exit chimney, the temperature has dropped to around 100 degrees. What leaves your house is not smoke, but mostly water vapor and carbon dioxide. Inside the bench, however, all that energy has been stored. Hundreds of pounds of earth slowly warm and then release their heat steadily over the next 12 to 24 hours. The surface stays around 90 to 100 degrees, warm to sit on, safe to touch, and comforting through the coldest nights. With a single 45-minute burn, using an armload of free twigs, an entire home can remain warm while a blizzard howls outside. No electricity, no gas line, no dependency on the grid. For roughly $300 in materials, anyone can build one. It is efficient, elegant, and astonishingly powerful, an engineering triumph hiding in plain sight. So if this heater burns 80 to 90% less wood, costs nearly nothing to run, and produces almost no smoke, then one question becomes impossible to ignore. Why, in most places, is it practically illegal to install one? Part 4. The Invisible Wall. To understand why a heater that burns 80% less wood is almost impossible to install legally, we have to step into a world far colder than winter itself. A world of codes, certifications, and quiet decisions that shape what we are allowed to build inside our own homes. Because the moment you try to install a rocket mass heater in a permitted house anywhere in North America, you collide with a barrier that feels invisible, yet completely immovable. This barrier is the International Residential Code, the rulebook that governs nearly every structure built today. And within that code is a simple requirement. Any wood-burning appliance must be listed and labeled by an approved testing laboratory. In practice, that means the underwriter's laboratory. UL testing is the golden stamp that makes an appliance legal. But here is where the system reveals its true shape. Sending a single wood stove through UL testing and EPA emissions certification costs upwards of $50,000. For a corporation producing 10,000 identical stoves, that fee barely registers. It's a business expense. They spread it across their entire product line and move on. A rocket mass heater, however, cannot pass through this system. Not because it is unsafe, but because it isn't a product at all. Every RMH is site-built. One bench might be short and compact for a tiny cabin, while another might curve along a full living room wall. One owner uses clay-rich soil, another uses sandier earth. No two are identical. There is no factory, no assembly line, no model number to certify. And so there is no pathway to attach the magic UL sticker that inspectors require. A building inspector sees cob and ducting and a bench built from the earth beneath your feet, and they are obligated to say the same words every time. Unlisted device, tear it out. At first glance, it sounds like sensible protection. After all, building codes exist to prevent house fires. But the moment you compare these rules to one particular exception, the logic collapses. Because masonry heaters, like the German Kachelofen, operate on almost identical physics. They burn hot and fast, store heat in a massive stone core, and release it slowly over the next 24 hours. They are, in principle, the same thermodynamic machine as the rocket mass heater. Yet masonry heaters are perfectly legal. Insurance companies approve them. Building inspectors sign off without hesitation. They appear in luxury homes across Europe and North America. And the reason has nothing to do with safety or engineering. A masonry heater costs between $10,000 and $30,000 to build. It requires specialized refractory parts and a certified master mason to install it. A powerful trade organization spent decades lobbying for its inclusion in the code. It fits neatly into the economic structure of the industry. A rocket mass heater, by contrast, costs $300 and can be built in a weekend by a rural family using earth from their own backyard. It removes dependency. It removes profit. It gives ordinary people the ability to heat their homes without paying a single recurring bill. And that is the difference the code was never designed to handle. Once an RMH is inside your home, its legal shadow follows you everywhere. Try to sell your house, and the heater becomes a material defect. Try to insure your home, and the company can deny coverage outright. If your house suffers a completely unrelated electrical fire, the dirt bench in your living room gives the adjuster the excuse to void your entire policy. No one arrests you. No one sends a warning letter. The enforcement is quieter, deeper, and far more effective. It works through paperwork, liability, and fear. It ensures that the one heater designed for ordinary people, clean, cheap, and nearly free to operate, remains locked outside the walls of any home built by the rules. And so the rocket mass heater is not outlawed by fire, but by the invisible architecture of bureaucracy itself. A system designed to protect homeowners has quietly become the wall that prevents them from ever becoming truly independent. Part 5. The Empire Strikes Back. To understand why a heater this efficient was pushed to the margins, we have to widen the frame far beyond one device or one building code. We have to look at the modern energy empire, a system that grew by convincing entire nations that warmth itself must be purchased, renewed, and paid for again every single winter. For more than a century, the heating industry has not sold comfort. It has sold dependence. You need their fuel. You need their certified technicians. You need their maintenance plans, replacement parts, and emergency service calls. The system is designed so that every cold night becomes a transaction. Every snowstorm, a reminder that without them, you freeze. And the less you understand about thermodynamics, the easier it is to accept this arrangement as natural. A global analysis by the research group Influence Map revealed how hard these industries fight to preserve that dependence. Across the United States, the European Union, and Australia, fossil fuel companies have poured enormous sums into campaigns meant to block any shift away from gas heating. Whenever a city attempts to electrify new buildings or promote alternative systems, the response comes instantly. Advertising blitzes warn of economic ruin. Lawsuits appear. AstroTurf organizations, fake community groups funded by industry, spread panic and misinformation. In the United States alone, trade associations like the American Gas Association successfully pushed preemption laws through 26 state legislatures. These laws forbid local towns from banning new gas hookups, effectively locking communities into fossil fuel heating whether they want it or not. Between 2010 and 2012, 8 major utilities spent $67 million lobbying Congress to stall clean air regulations that might weaken their position. When you look at a $30 billion HVAC industry and a natural gas monopoly worth many times more, the threat posed by the rocket mass heater becomes impossible to miss. Because the RMH is not just a better wood stove, it is a quiet revolt. If someone builds a rocket mass heater in their living room, they stop being a customer. They do not buy propane. They do not need a catalytic wood stove. They do not call the chimney sweep because the RMH burns so completely that there is barely any residue to clean. The ongoing revenue stream disappears. A person who heats their home with twigs gathered from the forest floor becomes invisible to the energy economy. And in a world built around subscriptions to survival, monthly bills, annual servicing, lifetime dependencies, that kind of independence is profoundly destabilizing. It is no wonder, then, that a device costing $300 and running for nearly free never found a welcome inside the modern heating marketplace. It does not fit the business model. It breaks it. And so the empire pushes back, not with open bans or dramatic headlines, but with quiet pressure, crafted narratives, and rules that select for profit rather than physics. Because in the end, an appliance that empowers ordinary people, cheap to build, clean to burn, and almost free to operate, is the one thing the industry cannot afford to let become mainstream. Part 6. A crack in the wall. For a long time it seemed as though the rocket mass heater would remain trapped behind the invisible wall of modern regulation. Yet physics has a way of resurfacing. A good idea can be buried, but it cannot be killed, especially when a small group of stubborn, brilliant rebels refuses to let it disappear. For more than 20 years, pioneers like Ernie and Erica Wisner dedicated their lives to proving what the code system insisted on denying. They built more than 700 rocket mass heaters with their own hands. They wrote detailed builder's guides, translating what looked like homesteader folklore into precise engineering language. Dimensions, calculations, emissions data, draft behavior, thermal storage curves. They showed inspectors the math. They demonstrated the tests. They proved, point by point, that the rocket mass heater was simply a variation of the already legal masonry heater, driven by the same thermodynamic principles. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the ice began to crack. In 2023, the International Code Council made a change so quiet that most people never heard about it, yet so significant that it reshaped the entire conversation. They added Appendix X, later refined into Appendix VV in the 2024 Code, to the International Residential Code. For the first time in modern history, the building code formally recognized site-built thermal mass heaters as a legitimate, legal category. The appendix laid out a simple pathway. Follow these dimensions, use these refractory materials, maintain these clearances to combustible walls, build it exactly as specified, and your rocket mass heater is compliant. No $50,000 UL test, no impossible bureaucratic gauntlet, just engineering executed correctly. It was a monumental victory for everyone who believed that warmth did not have to come with a subscription fee. It was proof that data, persistence, and physics could eventually pry open even the most rigid regulatory systems. Yet the triumph came with a reminder. The IRC is a model code, not a mandate. States and counties must choose to adopt the appendix voluntarily. And as of late 2024, only a handful of places, Vermont, Alaska, pockets of the Pacific Northwest, and parts of New Mexico, had taken that step. The wall has not fallen. The system of dependence has not vanished. But for the first time in 30 years, there is a door. Small, now, but real. And when a technology capable of heating a home for pennies finally finds even the smallest legal foothold, one thing becomes certain. The story is no longer about suppression, it is now about momentum. Conclusion: the lessons of the hearth. As we reach the end of the rocket mass heater's story, the question becomes simple. What does this forgotten technology teach us about how to live today? First, it forces us to rethink what efficiency truly means. We've been conditioned to believe that efficiency is a smarter thermostat or a slightly improved furnace. Yet real efficiency, the kind that keeps people alive in a blackout, comes from a different mindset. As Ianto Evans put it, a house doesn't care whether it's warm. What matters is warming the people inside it. Radiant heat from thermal mass warms bodies directly. It stores energy instead of wasting it. And even without a rocket mass heater, the principle applies. Let winter sunlight strike a dark floor. Create small, warm microspaces with heavy blankets. Focus on heating mass, not empty air. Second, we have to recognize how fragile our modern systems truly are. A storm can take down the grid. Gas lines can freeze. Supply chains can falter. Millions learned this during the Texas freeze, discovering that high-tech HVAC systems are comfort tools, not survival tools. The rocket mass heater stands as a reminder that ancient wisdom and modern physics are not opposites, they are allies. The fire is just the charger, the mass is the heater, and somewhere along the way we traded that brilliance for monthly bills. But the knowledge remains within reach, and as our world becomes less predictable and the cost of basic survival continues to rise, the answers often come from the edges, from the homesteaders, the experimenters, and the people willing to remember what others forgot. So we end with a final question. When the grid goes dark, who will sit shivering in a smart home, and who will settle onto a warm earthen bench, listening to the soft breath of a heater that needs nothing but a few fallen branches? Thank you for watching Historia Prime. If this journey into the lost art of survival heating opened your eyes, consider liking and subscribing. And tell us in the comments, would you build a rocket mass heater if you could? Stay curious, stay prepared, and keep exploring the hidden histories that shape our world.